So, I had a series of spoopy events occur while camping in October at the Blue River Reservoir. Yes, like a moron, I decided to go camping in Oregon in late October, and it was as wet as what you'd expect. I took a lot of photos on the trip, but unfortunately none that are really relevant, but some of them are useful to get the sense of total desolation of the whole area, which me and my sibling had totally to ourselves. This might go on for a bit, but hopefully the pictures should help. For anyone in the area who'd wish to check, there's proof of the claims I'm making still in the area. Arrive to the reservoir on the best dirt road available. Pick related goes up to the main road. For those in Oregon it's about 15 minutes away from Blue Sky Market. Accordingly, me and my sibling stumbled on a campsite previously used by druggies. I took no pictures of it, but it just resembled a pile of trash around the stone fire pit until I started noticing needles. As this was the best campsite given the weather and time of day, knowing it would get dark soon, I argued that it'd be best for us to clean it up instead of risking driving the truck down a steep muddy path further down into the dry lake bed. As far as normal trash goes, it was mostly old stuff, piles of moldering Q-tips, needles effing everywhere. I stopped counting after 20, discarded clothes, those red plastic cups you find in Mexican restaurants and family pizza places, Walmart and Target trash, DVDs with ruined covers, random medicine bottles, etc. After checking the dates on a few ruined magazines and local papers, it seemingly indicated that there were druggies in the area around July at the latest. There were approximately 3 details which stood out to me, however. Detail 1, there were kids' clothing in the pile, from little baby shoes to underwear for 10 to 12-year-olds. There wasn't much of it, but they were not in plastic or in shopping bags, they were discarded with the rest of the garbage. Detail 2, I found a spiral notebook that stuck out to me for 2 reasons. The first was that the first 1 to 2 pages had very simple recipes on them in pink pen, as if written for a child to understand. Off the top of my memory, pork and beans was one recipe, and the first 2 steps involved opening cans, and third and fourth involved pouring them into a pan and waiting for them to cook. This was alarming because the second thing I noticed was that only the bottom was wet, and the top part was almost entirely dry. This was impossible because the weather ranged from drizzly to pouring, and even if it wasn't wet at the moment, surely to God it would have turned into a spongy mess over the passage of time. That it wasn't the case made me suspicious about if I had pulled it from a pile of other trash and it had somehow managed to avoid being damaged by the elements. To use example, there were DVD cases with the covers almost entirely soaked and faded. I still have no explanation for this. Detail 3, I found a bottle of Starbucks coffee with the plastic seal on a few feet away from the fire pit. Its expiration date was in June of 2019. I have never heard of crackheads not drinking stuff they have stolen, and I have no idea where you would even get extremely expired Starbucks coffee. It's not as if this was out of the way, it was near the rest of the trash. The proof of this story is that there's 2 very tightly sealed trash bags in the area near we camped. We brought trash bags with us, but my sibling didn't want any junky trash, particularly needles, anywhere near his vehicle, so we left it off to the far side of the makeshift road. In the second post, if you can track it down, you can still find all this shit here if no one's touched it. So that's all within the first hour and a half of arrival. I know that druggies are not spooky, but there's enough oddities here and there to make me skittish, particularly given that I now had extreme suspicions about the area. My sibling laughed me off and started unpacking everything, in particular a tarp high enough to keep over the fire so we had a little area where he had relief from the constant drizzle. Angry that my attempt at camping in the woods and connecting with nature while enjoying legal weed got ruined by a bunch of goddamn pot-smoking hippies a few months prior, I figured that I wouldn't touch anything except beer for the remainder of the trip, in particular because that this would be a very bad place to get more skeeved out than I already was. After ensuring that not a single piece of tinfoil or crackhead garbage was in sight, we had a quick lunch, a box of Zatarans with some chopped kielbasa sausage mixed in. We went out and explored the area, which resulted in most the pictures you're seeing here. It's a massive landscape, and we basically had it entirely to ourselves. The area from our understanding was only drained for a few months, but there was so much unique plant life that we took our time looking at weird little plants we otherwise would never have noticed. There was some human-made trash around, but no sign of any druggy messes. Again, for Anons willing to check the area out, there's a old metal boat in the reservoir. I have no idea how long it's been down there, but it's visible as the only obviously unnatural object in the entire expanse of the place. I obviously checked it out and I feel silly for not taking any pictures, but it's there. For the record, my sibling also brought a gun on the trip, which I encouraged. As we didn't have any cell service whatsoever, I had my phone locked up in the truck. Anyhow, sundown was around 7 o'clock, and was accompanied by rain and more rain. I'll say this, the general idea of Bigfoot is a lot funnier until you are cold and wet in the middle of the Pacific Northwest and the only source of light you have is a fire, and it's so friggin' dark you could be 6 feet away from a cliff with a 15-foot drop into a rocky dry lake bed and you can't see it. Anyhow, shit got weird around 2 a.m., where we both thought we heard people laughing. Naturally we got freaked the hell out. My sibling got their flashlight and gun and we both went out to confront who we assumed would be druggies. We saw nothing, there was nothing around. We head back inside the tent. When we woke up the next day, when making breakfast we both noticed that we had messed up and left some food, chocolate, graham crackers, and marshmallows, out on the log we were using on a place to put our stuff on while we sat near the fire. There was not a single bug in any of the food, merely the graham crackers were moist. In fact we both admitted to not having seen a single bug whatsoever yesterday, not even an ant or spider. Hell, with all the old crap we were screwing with, that we didn't see any bugs under the trash was now mildly concerning. This is basically the final detail leading up to the really weird shit we saw later the same day. We were both doing dorky little sibling bonding activities, specifically making little miniature landscape paintings, when we noticed a weird figure stumble out from the forest into the lake basin. I shit you not, it was someone dressed as Elvis Presley in full regalia. Due to the lighting and the weather, it was hard to make out what it was. Coiffed hair, sunglasses, a boxy white suit, it was a goddamn Elvis impersonator. At best, I could say that the skin that was exposed was pale pink, not some unnatural shade or anything like that. My sibling noticed it first, hushed up immediately, and made the two of us duck in the small bowl-shaped area we were in. Elvis just sort of shuffled about until he made it to the water. His gait and overall posture reminded me as if make a Frisch's big boy statue walk because it overwhelmingly came to mind that the proportions were off enough to remind me of a big toddler somehow. Elvis, after making it to the river, hunched down and did a sort of Slav squat until he was angled sort of like a frog, and simply fell headfirst into the river, vanishing entirely. This was impossible, as the water was, at most, 2 feet deep and, while fast moving, was very very clear to the extent that the exact dimensions of the stream isn't clear from a distance because it looks smaller than it is. Naturally we stop everything and head down to investigate. I didn't know what to think, but from what I saw it looked to me like a deeply intoxicated man in a Halloween costume just stumbled into fast-moving water. Obviously we found nothing. I forgot to edit the last image to show the path of the guy. By full regalia I meant it was a suit something like the classic Mexican sundial suit, but with tassels on the shoulders, which were very boxy and really made the head look smaller. In addition, the person had a big pompadour which, along with the sunglasses, hid their face. I don't think this was ever a look Elvis actually ever had, but it was the closest thing we could come up with as a comparison. The hair was a lot larger than what Elvis ever had himself, I think. This is a forced perspective shot, but these are very small canvases within the bowl. Anyway, much later, my sibling admits that they think they saw where Elvis came from. To be exact, they think they saw him come out from behind a tree. The problem with this is that it was a tree that wasn't particularly close to any of the others, and he was such a stark color contrast to the environment, all whites and golds and blacks, that it's not really probable for the person to have snuck behind the tree before heading for the clearing, especially as we had what amounted to a bird's eye view, Instead, they were either lying on the ground behind the tree or, well, popped out from under the ground like a goddamn worm or mushroom. We went to the tree, we walked around it to see if there was anything that would make sense. We couldn't find any holes or anything, or even, crucially, footprints. The shoes were white and glittery even in the bad weather. The ground was muddy with almost no real vegetation. Bonus image, scared salamander my sibling nearly stepped on. I felt really bad about it, but we both just kind of oogled it for a few minutes before walking off. Anyway, the rest of the trip was more mundane. We checked the local waterfall and the big pipe which was seemingly connected to the main river, nothing of note except for abundance of salamanders, which was the only wildlife we saw in the area except for a single worm crawling around. This includes birds, which we heard but never saw. We went mushroom foraging later, which we opted to eventually just take pictures of instead of pick due to not really having a place to safely put them, even though my sibling was initially interested in doing spore prints. Nothing particularly strange happened afterward. My sibling, being a firefighter on their off-season, was not familiar with the area but familiar with the protocols, told me that if it really bothered me they'd be fine with contacting a local ranger after the trip wrapped up, but I know they haven't yet. So yeah, this is something with a mild amount of proof to it. Anyone in the area could probably do a little hiking and find the 2 trash bags. The trip for me went from skeevy, I half expected to find a body or something out in the basin, to just hella weird. I couldn't find any real local legends about the area, but the things that creeped me out still about 3 weeks and half a continent of distance from the event is Elvis and the nighttime laughter. I'm not even worried about the trash irregularities or the lack of insect activities now. I just kind of assume it's just druggies being druggies, not some missing 411 weirdness. I did learn what stick Indians are now, though, which successfully gave me the heebie-jeebies. I live far, far away from Oregon, but again, this is in Blue River Reservoir. If druggie nests can last for months without being disturbed, the trash bags will probably be undisturbed for a long time. So, some final thoughts before bedtime. I'm happy to answer questions too. As you can tell by the bloggy nature of this thread, the whole event is burnt into my memory. First off, I have no idea what the wildlife of the area is like in terms of both bugs and other animals. That me and my sibling spent 3 days in the woods, with 2 being more or less half days due to travel needs, doesn't mean I feel like we got the full brunt of biodiversity the area presumably has. We saw 5 salamanders total and that was it. Presumably that's an indication of good water quality if anything. There was a single worm we noticed, but that was it for true insect activity. If anyone can say that the forests of Oregon by late October doesn't have ants in them or something, that'd be great. Given that this was October, the idea that we saw a normal man in an Elvis costume obviously comes to mind. After the initial shock wore off, I thought we were watching some kind of film being made. Clearly, it wasn't the case, but it was a thought I had. I also don't know what to expect in a drug den either, but those were the items that stood out to me. If there is any reason at all to have some expired food around, or where one would get an expired Starbucks coffee drink, that'd be great. One thing that really interested me with the sealed drink is that, assuming it really was left to the elements, that it would have inevitably cracked during winter nighttime temperatures in the region. If someone is willing to test if it can survive a freeze, let me know.